Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Monday night in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. First off, I just want to say thanks to Adam Lash, who tweeted at me earlier today asking if I could comment on some of the recent articles that have been released about the Tonga Eruption that was back in January of this year. I've been meaning to do that, and you've been watching here a satellite animation of that eruption from the GOES 17 satellite back on January 15th. Now you can see in the title about how the volcano, which is about 150 meters below the ocean surface, basically vaporized a lot of seawater and sent it deep into the stratosphere. And of course, that's the layer just above the troposphere being the layer we live in, the one that has all of the weather in it. And reading through this brief article, but then spending some time today looking at the actual letter in Geophysical Research Letters, the actual article in Geophysical Research Letters, one of the things that really just kind of blew my mind here was this statement right in through here. So it said that 146 plus or minus 5 teragrams of water vapor were put into the stratosphere, and that's about 10% of the total water content in the stratosphere. Now, the big questions that remain are, what will this do in terms of warming the atmosphere? We know that water vapor is an abundant greenhouse gas. Okay, so in the lower atmosphere, it's very good. In fact, it's responsible for about 50% of our natural greenhouse effect. And so the big questions are, will this excess, stratospheric water vapor have an impact on global temperatures? And we also have to remember that a lot of this was in the southern hemisphere, which is important to understand as well. In other words, will the impacts be greater there than in the northern hemisphere? But one of the great figures from this paper is this one right here, looking at depth in the atmosphere for water vapor, all sorts of different things. And what I really found amazing about this particular graphic was when it was looking at the depth of water vapor being put into the stratosphere. Notice that the Pacific Northwest wildfires, the pyrocumulus clouds, back in the end of 2017 right here, were ejecting water vapor up 15 to 17 kilometers in the atmosphere. And then we saw down here several big volcanic eruptions, which are also notable. And then the fires. Do you remember the terrible fires, the bushfires in Australia at the end of 2019? Really, the last time we were seeing, the excessive heat due to the tail end of that El Niño event. So, there's a lot of great stuff in this article. We're going to continue to investigate this to see if it has any impact on our upcoming fall and winter weather. It's very hard for me right now to attribute this to any heat or drought we saw this summer. I thought most of the attribution was coming from the behavior of the Pacific Ocean temperatures and La Niña. But I just want to let you know we're looking into this and reading it quite a bit. Now, speaking of those big wildfires putting a lot of water vapor deep into the stratosphere, I'm going to just take you to an animation I saved off on Saturday of some of the very large fires like this one here in Oregon. You can see on the infrared the heat signature from this, but watch it again as it goes back to the visible imagery. And right as the sun sets, see that big, that's a pyrocumulus cloud that gets pushed up like this. That's some of the water vapor from these fires that we're talking about here. And then, of course, over the weekend, the U.S. Forest Service, I just have a small animation of this, showed us the mosquito fire, which was terrible in parts of California at the end of last week and over the weekend. Okay, today, just looking at where we stand with all of this, we have this upper level low that's sitting and spinning right over, almost over Chicago, where over the weekend it dumped a tremendous amount of rain in parts of southern Wisconsin and northern Illinois. And that upper level low is wrapping into it some smoke on the backside. So a lot of this is wildfire smoke from the west. Now you can't see a lot of the wildfires in the west today because of all of the subtropical moisture that's been injected into the Intermountain West from the remnants of K. Once Hurricane K downgraded to a tropical storm. I'll show you the rainfall totals in just a few minutes. And what we're going to be seeing in this forecast is a lot of the action in terms of where the moisture will be and where we're going to see low pressure development will stay partly in the west initially, and then a lot of systems kind of rolling along the U.S.-Canada border. So that'll be after we get this upper level low out of the way. I want to give you some stats, though. This would be the first 11 days of the month here. This is average temperature ranks. So the depth of that ridge, which was over 6,000 meters at one point, now has set for at least the first 11 days of September. Everywhere that has the number 1 in it is now new record warmest during that time frame. And when we look back at soil moisture from the beginning of September, we do notice that while there were locally heavy rainfall amounts, for example, in the south and southeast, right here on the Wisconsin-Illinois border, take note of some of the places that missed out on this recent rainfall. Very, very dry in parts of the western Corn Belt and the northern plains. Now, a lot of this is going to be seeing quite a bit of precipitation in the coming days, but there was at least some rainfall that came through Nebraska and Iowa and a little bit into Kansas over the weekend from the front that met up with that upper level low that was sitting today over Indiana, Illinois, and Michigan and Wisconsin. So to add to this, let's go ahead and look at the precipitation statistics. Again, first 11 days of the month. And again, we can kind of really pick out those drier areas. Now, the moisture that came into Southern California, this was all from K. The really wet weather we've seen here, this was from a system that came through earlier in the month hitting New England, breaking their drought. And then a lot of the heavier rains here just as of late. This was the big upper level low that's now sitting over Lake Michigan. I'm in Fargo right now, so I'm in a dry spot right up here where especially on this side of the Red River, these two big reporting districts here in northern Minnesota, quite dry for this time of year. But let's go ahead and take a look at where the current setup is. And this is important to kind of see. There it goes. First of all, the jet stream has lost that big ridge feature that's been over the west, so that's out. We even see a little shortwave coming through the Puget Sound. I'll talk about this more in a few seconds. Here's our cutoff low. And when I say cutoff, I mean it's cut off from the main branch of the jet stream. It's kind of sitting down here. It's getting pulled along. The stronger winds aided by this ridge that's sitting off the southeast coast are helping to move this off. But it was this cutoff low and the front that it ran into plus K that really made the story for our last 7 days of rainfall. So if you just take note here, K through parts of the Baja of Mexico and some places putting down over 10 inches of rain. We had one location down here in Southern California that saw over 5 inches of rain from this. And again, the moisture from K is still moving throughout the Intermountain West. You can almost see the orientation of the front as it sliced through the upper Midwest, again, hitting South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, and parts of Kansas over the weekend, including some bigger storms that kind of went right down the side here of that front into Oklahoma and northern Texas. But all the wet weather you see here came from two different events. The first one about a week ago right now, moving through New England, and then that upper level low that raced up here inside over Chicago today, and that helped deliver a lot of tropical moisture into this area. So again, this is your last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation. And since we're talking about the tropics, just want to point out we did have these most recent two named systems, Danielle and Earl, finally bump up our accumulated cyclone energy, but we're still sitting at about half of what is normal for this time of year. So this has been a relatively inactive season. We can blame that on untimely wind shear in the Atlantic. We can also blame that on very dry and dusty air at times across the Atlantic. But today, the 12th, is the climatological peak of the hurricane season, so we still have the whole second half of this to go, which means things could really start to ramp up. At present, National Hurricane Center from their 2 p.m. Eastern Time update today is watching two systems. There's a lead wave here. They've given a 20% chance at surviving, and a wave following where they've given a 20% chance of surviving. What's interesting, though, is that the latest European model updates suggest that that lead wave could make it north of the Greater Antilles, maybe over the Bahamas. And there's also, a chance for some secondary development here just off of the Florida coast here in the Atlantic. We're going to watch for that later on this week. As it stands, given the presence of the subtropical ridge, the models are trying to turn this out and not bring it into the East Coast. But I'll be watching this wave right here very, very carefully. Looking at ocean temperatures, our La Niña, we're kind of zoomed in here, right in close to the Americas. The La Niña continues to be quite strong. But take note of the warmer water where these systems are coming through. It's interesting, you can see the cold water trail from Earl here and from K there. So they extract a lot of heat from the ocean surface and churn up the water. That's why you can see it. But this La Niña, latest update from those trade winds, they remain strong. Not nearly as strong as they had been this summer, but they're still very much there. And we're still seeing some westerly winds. See the reds in through here in this part of the Indian Ocean. So I think, overall, this is still the most dominant teleconnection we have. It seems to be kind of pinning the MJO into null space, not allowing it to really jump out and move around. But some of the breaking up or the weakening of these trade winds, I think, is being translated along with the seasonal transition we get in the northern hemisphere to allow for the momentum to start to come back up here between, let's call it 40 and 60 north. So we're going to be watching for these colors to show up here very soon. Global angular momentum is above normal right now, but a lot of that's coming down here in the jet stream that's in the southern hemisphere. It's been quite strong as of late. Now, since we're talking about all of this wrapped up into a discussion about La Niña, I do want to show you, this was released last Thursday from Columbia University. It's, again, their statistical outlook on the probability of having La Niña in blue, INSO neutral in gray, and El Nino in red. And if you notice here that at some point late this fall, we do expect, and it's been a consistent part of the story, that La Niña conditions could drop off relatively quickly through winter. The most important part about that, what's most important about this occurring is the development of a subtropical jet stream. Let me go back here and show you what I mean. All last year, the jet stream ran over the top and came into the United States like this. This whole year we've been in. We've not seen that jet stream coming from Hawaii targeting California or moving across the Baja hitting Texas. If we get rid of this La Niña, we could start to see the redevelopment of a subtropical jet. And again, something we've not seen going back almost two winters. So that's how important this forecast is, to see the neutral conditions come back into play, allowing the jet stream to break up into its two normal pieces, the polar branch and the subtropical branch. And I'll just make a comment here, and it's just a comment, but normally, historically, after stronger La Niñas, when the atmosphere does break over toward neutral, it almost always overshoots into El Nino. Just saying again that I wouldn't be surprised, although it's not forecastable at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised if getting into the discussion about 2023 growing season, we're talking about an El Nino event. Okay, a lot to be discussed and analyzed there. I just want to put that out. Okay, I just want to also provide some support with that forecast from the latest updates from the CFSV2. This has also continued to show a peak of this La Niña happening sometime in November, and then fading back toward neutral conditions by midwinter into spring. So there's at least multi-model support with this. Okay, because of that La Niña, we continue to see, and we've looked at these in depth last week, but we continue to see our fall precipitation pattern being dominated by La Niña, which you can see from the CPC, from the National Multi-Model Ensemble, and the European. All are calling for drier conditions across parts of the South, the Mid-South, even pockets of the Midwest and Southeast. So you can see it in all three models. There's also indications that with that jet stream picking up momentum in the North Pacific, we could start to bring more systems into the Northwest. And as you can see, all three models are indicating more active frequency of weather systems in the Northwest, therefore above average precipitation. This could also mean harvest issues in the northern plains if there's too many weather systems rolling through that area. So we need to watch these three forecasts evolve as we go forward, but this again just is the latest reflection of that La Niña forecast. Now, the latest European weeklies, looking at the time period of September 21 to October 21, that'd be the first full month of astronomical fall, the models went substantially drier across a big section of the country. Actually quite drier. I'll show you. Here's the previous run for that same time period. We can now see that the latest run just really went over drier. Most of this is likely due to initialization, because over the next 15 days, we're going to watch systems roll along the U.S.-Canada border. Okay, we're going to see that subtropical Puma moisture in the next few days go through the Intermountain West, but ridging overall, plus a lack of forecasting any major landfalling tropical systems over the next 15 days, has got this drier. So the models were initialized with that, not only the near term, but the weeklies were as well. What I'm looking for really comes to us via the upper levels of the atmosphere. And what I want to do here is play this out through this week. And let's just park it out here this weekend. So at this particular point, what I am looking for are any significant or any substantial signs of blocking. Blockings occur where you have a big ridge over a trough. But this won't be a blocked up pattern because of the trough that's over Alaska. The jet stream will flow around it, dive into the west, which means we're still going to be talking about that system the 17th to the 20th. We've been kind of concerned about that much of last week. But I still see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 waves in this pattern and not too much hinting at a block. I do notice that the models spread this all out by the 21st. They keep a high momentum jet rolling through the Bering Sea. See that right into there. But whether or not this translates into more systems coming across North America, the models have washed that out. Okay, they've really just lost that signal. I continue to say that because of the behavior of the North Pacific jet, we'll be looking at about a system per week rolling across the northern tier of the United States, while we'll be drier farther to the south. Now, bringing it into the near-term forecast before I talk about South America and a couple other places internationally, this is what we're seeing right now in terms of vertically integrated smoke content from the high-resolution rapid refresh model. This takes us out over the next couple of days. So we can see here the smoke getting wrapped up into that upper level low that moves into New England. We can see the smoke cascading over the top of a ridge, but you also start to see, if you just take a look at this, the smoke kind of getting pulled in this direction right in through here around a low that we're going to be talking about. And we have today on our all hazards weather map as of 5:30 this evening, we do notice that there is still air quality alerts that are out for much of the Pacific Northwest getting over to Wyoming, and flood watches farther to the south of that. So let's go right on into the high-res NAM model from this afternoon and kind of see these all playing forward. So let's talk about the upper level low first. You're going to watch tonight the storms clearing the East Coast, but the upper level low still spinning over lower Michigan. And then by tomorrow morning, it brings some pretty heavy rain in pockets into parts of New England. That upper level low won't leave New England until we get really out to Wednesday morning. After that point, really after Tuesday, so much of this whole region of the country is going to be dry. We're not going to see much precipitation. Now let's come back over to the west. We can see here scattered storms this afternoon and this evening getting into tomorrow morning, rolling through parts of the Great Basin into the Intermountain West, even coming out of parts of Washington and Oregon, although there wasn't too much heavy rain out of this today. We're then going to see, look at that, this will be in the evening tomorrow, a lot of thunderstorm activity with that subtropical moisture. But what we're going to be watching is a little shortwave that I showed you earlier. It was this guy right here, okay? That one's going to be pulling out into parts of Montana, possibly bringing in some showers and storms. It's going to curl up into a little low that'll be right here on the U.S.-Canada border. That's the one that by the time we get into Wednesday night, Thursday morning, could deliver more rainfall into parts of the Dakotas. And this is a place I think we're going to see some wetter conditions for a while. To see that on the high-res European model, let's just play through the day on Wednesday where we picked up. So there's that low. This is Wednesday night. You can now see it's going to spread rain right along the border here on Thursday. But there's a second wave that comes in. See it there on Friday getting into Saturday. And here comes the third push right here on Sunday. I'll be watching carefully to see this low develop somewhere between the 18th and 19th, most likely in Wyoming, then passing into North Dakota. And that's the one that I think next week could be a pretty potent system. A lot of advection and moisture out ahead of it. Expect storms to kind of peel down the main front here. But if you noticed, I didn't talk at all about what was going on here because there's just nothing coming after this upper level low leaves. By the way, the depth of that trough on the 17th through the 20th, cold enough to be putting down some snow at the higher elevations. So let's do a little model comparison here. This is the European model forecast for the next 7 days. You can see a total precipitation. So we're now combining all of these systems rolling along the U.S.-Canada border with the drier conditions to the south of it. This is what the GFS said, the 12Z GFS run. If we look at the differences here, the GFS was a bit wetter in the western Corn Belt. The European was wetter west, wetter with those systems coming along the U.S.-Canada border until we talk about the system leaving today over parts of the Great Lakes. All right, so we kind of pushed through that relatively quickly because I think the pattern seems to be just dominated by those few things. What we want to then do is talk about where this goes into week 2. Because you notice by this Saturday, getting into Sunday and Monday, those are some deep troughs that are barreling through the western United States. It's going to knock the temperatures back, and it's also going to excite a rather large system at some point, I think Sunday, Monday, Tuesday here on the plains. And this is a pretty good setup. A ridge over the southeast, the flow comes around this, right where that front will be. I just think we need to be watching the 19th and 20th time frame. Now, the model still has pretty large spread. So you look fully at the week 2 precipitation anomalies, and really all it shows you is the rebuilding of a ridge in the west, so drier, and the ridge that sits over the southeast, drier. You can see the tropical possibilities here getting into week 2 as well, but we still have a lot of uncertainty about that too. On the temperature side of it, this morning we did have frost up here in parts of Minnesota. Really quite cold around the upper level low, with a rebounding of heat here back in the plains getting in the Intermountain West. But on Tuesday, the warmth comes back to Nebraska. It stays there on Wednesday and spreads into parts of South Dakota, while the West Coast gets a pretty substantial break from the heat it's been enduring. The end of this week just shows where that ridge begins to open up and the warmth comes back. This is kind of like normal summer or late summer warmth, But the good news is, even though a ridge does try to rebuild into the western United States, what we don't see is a major resurgence going out here into the third week of September and beyond of heat. I mean, big time heat coming back into the west. I still don't even think that this is going to be excessively hot. So what I want to point out is, out to day 10, this is day 5 through 10, with the drier conditions coming in through here, this is going to push these crops quickly toward harvest and a fast dry down. So just something to be considering here. Lastly, we just need to talk about South America. They are 3 days away from kind of the official start to planting. And the latest European operational run has some heavy rains coming out of Paraná down into Mato Grosso do Sul, and it has some hints at the start of the monsoon. Where it's drier is in Rio Grande do Sul, Uruguay, along the Paraná River, and pockets throughout Argentina. And the latest long-range update for that same time period we looked at the U.S., this would be September 21 to October 21, continues to show an early start to the monsoon, which means we would probably have relatively fast planting throughout the Brazilian growing areas. Where it's drier is kind of mimicking what we see right now in the models. Rio Grande do Sul, Uruguay, into Argentina. Since we're here, I just want to point out again that, let's go to Australia quickly. They're still expecting normal to above normal rainfall. That's typical of a La Niña hitting them in early spring. And also coming back north of the equator, take a look at how dry southern China is continuing to be forecast. This is disastrous here. And India having a late season surge of moisture is quite important as well. This is very late for the monsoon to be pushing in excess of 2 to 5 inches of rain into this area. So we'll keep an eye on all these places and keep you updated, and I'll talk to you again on Thursday evening. Have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk to you then. Thanks.